You must understand that the connection between the narcissist and the empath is not simply a relationship between two personalities. It is an encounter between two primordial forces that have been entwined since the dawn of human consciousness, the devourer of light and the bearer of healing. They are bound by an ancient, silent contract, one that neither recalls consciously yet continues to fulfill instinctively. When one of these energies withdraws, when the empath finally steps out of the rhythm of appeasement, an extraordinary shift begins to unfold. The narcissist, once nourished by the endless reflection of their own grandeur in the empath's gaze, begins to face an abyss, a void they have spent their entire life running from. It is in this space that the mask begins to falter. The elaborate facade, that ornate armor forged to shield the fragile child within, starts to crack under the weight of exposure. The narcissist's persona is not merely a false front. It is a survival structure built with meticulous care over years of psychological warfare. Beneath it lives the terrified child whose needs were met not with tenderness, but with criticism, neglect, or conditional affection. As long as the empath continues to mirror back the narcissist's illusions, their crafted image of perfection, power, and control, the armor stays intact. It gleams with the approval and admiration reflected upon it. But the moment the empath stops playing that role, stops supplying the endless validation that sustains the illusion, fractures appear. These fractures are not just emotional, they are existential. When the empath refuses to provide the narcissist with their reflection, the narcissist's entire identity trembles on the edge of collapse. In that collapse, the shadow begins to emerge. The narcissist's shadow is not merely the dark collection of unflattering traits they deny, arrogance, manipulation, deceit. It is the sacred container of everything they have deemed too unbearable to face. Within it lies the shame too vast to name, the terror of worthlessness too intense to confront, and the desperate hunger for love too vulnerable to admit. When the empath's gaze no longer serves as the mirror that reinforces the false self, this shadow begins to encroach upon consciousness. The narcissist feels it as suffocation, as rage, as a sudden, unexplainable emptiness that no new supply can soothe. They may react with fury, striking out to regain control. They may withdraw entirely, retreating into isolation or fantasy. They may reinvent themselves overnight, adopting a new mask, a new story, a new admirer, all in a desperate attempt to restore equilibrium. Yet, no matter the form this reaction takes, the deeper truth remains. Without the empath's reflection, the narcissist stands before a mirror that no longer lies. It is the mirror of the self, unfiltered and unforgiving. This is the most dangerous moment for both souls. The danger lies in the narcissist's capacity for psychic violence, the instinct to destroy what threatens their illusion. The potential, however, lies in the possibility that the narcissist may, for the first time, meet their own shadow and endure its gaze long enough for transformation to begin. This alchemical process is rare. Far more often, when deprived of their supply, the narcissist does not awaken, they amplify. They become a more exaggerated version of what they have always been, more demanding, more controlling, more desperate to assert dominance over the narrative that is slipping through their fingers. You have taken away the source of their psychic sustenance, the sun that fueled their illusions, and now they are left grasping at fragments of identity, seeking any new source of light to keep the darkness from swallowing them whole. From a symbolic perspective, the empath's withdrawal is akin to the moon turning away from the sun. The light that once reflected the sun's brilliance now recedes, and the sun, unable to see itself in the night, begins to fear that it has gone out entirely. This moment has been told in myths for centuries: the fall of the false king, the madness of the tyrant, the unraveling of the golden mask. The mask was never the truth, it was only a performance sustained by the belief of others. And when the audience walks away, the stage falls silent. The applause ceases, leaving only the echo of emptiness. In the symbolic landscape of dreams and the language of the unconscious, this transition often appears long before it manifests in waking life. The empath might dream of closing a door and hearing desperate pounding on the other side, or of walking away from a grand banquet that grows cold and dim in their absence. The narcissist's dreams, if ever revealed, might portray humiliation, a stripping away of titles, clothes, or possessions before a watching crowd. These images speak the truth of what is unfolding beneath consciousness, the inevitable fracture between illusion and reality. When the empath finally stops feeding the false self, they withdraw not only their energy, but their silent consent to sustain the narcissist's myth. This refusal sends tremors through the narcissist's entire psychic structure. For years, perhaps decades, they have relied on mirrors, people, achievements, symbols of success to confirm their existence. Yet sensitive souls like you, the empathic and intuitive, are the most precious mirrors of all, because you reflect not only their grandiosity, but also their lost innocence. When you stop, it is as though you remove the most flattering mirror in their palace, leaving them alone with the cracked one hidden in the attic, the one they have feared all their lives. And so, who does the narcissist become in this moment of deprivation? Some become hunters, tirelessly seeking new sources of admiration, new hearts to feed their hunger. Others turn into ghosts, fading into solitude or fantasy, preferring illusion to exposure. Still others transform into tyrants, forcing reality to comply with their narrative through manipulation, guilt, or rage. Archetypally, they become the wounded king raging against the kingdom that no longer kneels, or the magician whose spells fail once the apprentice departs. Beneath all these variations, however, lies the same truth. The narcissist without an empath is like a shadow without a light. It remains, but it cannot move with the same vitality. Here is where the mystical dimension emerges. The empath's withdrawal does not merely alter the narcissist, it alters the entire psychic ecosystem shared between them. Every relationship is a living field of energy, a dynamic organism. When one being changes its pattern, the entire system must recalibrate. By refusing to feed the narcissist's illusion, the empath introduces a vacuum. And in the language of the unconscious, a vacuum is both an invitation and a threat. It can summon transformation or destruction. If the narcissist cannot evolve, they will attempt to annihilate the forces that expose their fragility. That is why the period following an empath's withdrawal is often the most perilous, but also the most liberating. This is the crossing of an archetypal threshold. You, the empath, are stepping out of a mythic role, the healer, the redeemer, the sacrificial one, and into the wilderness of your own autonomy. It is not merely a psychological act, but a sacred initiation. The myths of heroes tell of those who must leave behind companions to face the forest alone, but they seldom reveal that some of those companions were illusions, enchantments that bound the hero to limitation. The narcissist may accuse you of betrayal, of cruelty, of abandoning them in their hour of need. They may weave intricate stories where you become the villain. Yet this is projection, the shadow attempting to restore the narrative that keeps it hidden. For the narcissist, the greatest wound is not your absence, but the death of the story in which they were the protagonist. They cannot bear the silence that follows when the play ends. In dreams, they may wander through wastelands, stripped of identity, a fallen king searching for meaning. Some lash out like wounded beasts. Others, in rare cases, kneel before the darkness within and begin the painful work of integration. Only this path leads to healing, but few have the courage to endure it. The empath must understand your withdrawal is not an act of punishment. It is the deepest form of truth-telling. It honors both souls by refusing to perpetuate the illusion. By stepping away, you grant the narcissist the only true chance they may ever have to meet themselves. Whether they accept that opportunity is not for you to decide. In letting go, you also meet yourself anew, not as the eternal giver, but as the guardian of your own spirit. And so the dance ends, or perhaps it transforms. The music softens, the lights dim, and you walk away from the stage. Behind you, the narcissist lingers in the half-light, uncertain, disoriented, stripped of reflection. Before you lies the unlit path, vast, silent, and waiting. If you listen closely, beyond the echoes of what was, you will hear the whisper of your own soul saying, "Now we begin." When the empath departs, the narcissist's first encounter is not with emptiness, but with themselves. This is the moment their entire architecture trembles. All the energy once directed outward, all the projections and performances now collapse inward. They may fill the void with noise, with new admirers, declarations, distractions, but none of it reaches the wound. The fortress they built from charm, power, victimhood, and illusion begins to crumble. Each mask falls away, revealing what has always waited beneath: the child, unprotected, unseen, and still longing to be loved. The fortress does not collapse in flames. It disintegrates quietly, one stone at a time, until they find themselves exposed to the night air of their own psyche. From the viewpoint of the unconscious, this moment is archetypal. It is the descent into the underworld, the shedding of royal garments, the breaking of the enchanted mirror. In every myth, the hero who loses their crown must face the beasts that dwell beneath the palace. For the narcissist, these monsters are the unprocessed grief, the shame, and the self-loathing they have hidden behind charm, control, or cruelty. The empath's departure becomes the call to this underworld. Yet, unlike the mythic hero, the narcissist rarely answers willingly. They claw at the surface, desperate to avoid the descent, because to face what waits below would mean the death of the persona they have mistaken for the self. And yet, beneath all their resistance, the unconscious moves with its own inevitable will. The dreams begin to shift. Where once the narcissist dreamt of victory, conquest, seduction, and admiration, now they may dream of endless corridors that lead nowhere, of mirrors that reflect nothing, of voices echoing from the dark. The unconscious is never cruel. It is relentless. It seeks wholeness even when the conscious mind seeks dominance. This is why the empath's withdrawal is not merely a loss, but a rite of passage for both souls. For you, the empath, this withdrawal marks the beginning of individuation. You have lived so long in the gravitational pull of another's need that you may not remember where you end and they begin. By stepping away, you enter a liminal space, a psychic twilight, where your own image begins to return to you. At first, this can be profoundly disorienting. You may feel the phantom tug of their expectations, the echo of their voice woven into your own inner dialogue. The part of you that was trained to anticipate their moods will still listen for distant storms. This is the residue of archetypal possession, when one figure in the psyche dominates the entire field of awareness, molding your identity around their emotional weather. In this twilight, your dreams may also begin to transform. You might see yourself wandering through empty rooms, discovering hidden doors you never opened before. You might dream of finding an old cloak, a forgotten dress, a robe that once belonged to you. These symbols reveal the soul reclaiming what it once relinquished to play the role of caretaker, healer, or redeemer. In Jungian analysis, such dreams signal that the psyche is rebalancing its energies, that the archetype of the self is stirring beneath the ruins of the old dynamic. Meanwhile, the narcissist's path without you becomes a study in compensation. Some will overinflate, crafting an even grander facade to armor themselves against the wound. Others will implode, collapsing into isolation and victimhood, convinced they have been irreparably wronged. In rare and luminous cases, the absence of the empath's mirroring will corner them into confronting the unbearable truth that their hunger for control and admiration was born from a primal terror of abandonment. If they can stand in that psychic fire without extinguishing it, something extraordinary might occur. The false self can fracture enough for the real self to emerge. But this emergence is never radiant. It is raw, trembling, stripped of pretense. It is the face they have concealed even from themselves. I have often said that one does not become whole by imagining figures of light, but by bringing the darkness into consciousness. When you withdraw, you compel the narcissist, whether they recognize it or not, to face that darkness. And in doing so, you too are called to face your own. For it was not by accident that you were drawn into this ancient dance. Somewhere in your own psychic history lies a resonance with theirs. Perhaps you too once learned that love must be earned through endless giving, that safety comes only when others are pleased. These beliefs are the invisible filaments that bound you to them. To cut these threads is not only to release the narcissist, but to release yourself from the ancient wound that taught you to equate worth with sacrifice. When the empath stops playing the role, a profound inversion unfolds. The narcissist, once appearing powerful, begins to unravel. The empath, who once felt small and powerless, begins to see the truth of their quiet strength. It is not a strength rooted in dominance, but in sacred refusal. The refusal to abandon oneself in the service of another's illusion. This is the steady, unshakable strength of the self emerging from the shadow, the moment the inner sovereign awakens from dormancy. And yet, the path from here is not without its tests. The narcissist may return cloaked in remorse, their words threaded with the illusion of change. They may invoke the shared history, reminding you of moments when their mask was almost convincing enough to feel like love. They may promise redemption or renewal. Here, discernment becomes your most essential ally. Real transformation in the narcissist is possible but exceedingly rare, and it never arrives swiftly. It is slow, painful, and marked by a growing capacity to feel the sorrow they once buried. Without that capacity, all promises are only new disguises. In the mystical language of the psyche, when one figure exits the stage, another must emerge. By leaving the narcissist's theater, you make space for a different actor. The archetype of the self, the inner guide, the guardian who has waited patiently behind the curtain for the false drama to end. This voice will not command or demand. It will invite. It will not drain you but nourish you. And as you listen to it, you begin to remember something ancient, that you were never meant to be a reflection in another's story, but the central figure in your own. Meanwhile, the narcissist stands at a crossroads. They can seek another empath, repeating the cycle until it collapses again, or they can turn toward the mirror that no longer flatters them and begin the arduous pilgrimage toward wholeness. That journey may never begin in this lifetime, but your departure plants the seed of possibility. And in the realm of the soul, even a single seed can, with time, fracture stone. Time has its own quiet alchemy in the psyche. In the weeks and months after you step away, the searing heat of rupture cools into a deeper revelation. Both you and the narcissist enter distinct psychic seasons. Though your paths remain linked by the invisible threads of memory, for you, this is a season of return, not to them, but to the forgotten landscapes within yourself. For them, it is the season of reckoning, a slow and often unconscious confrontation with the hunger that once defined them, now stripped of its source. In my experience, the unconscious continues to weave its images long after separation. The empath, freed from the daily erosion of their vitality, begins to dream of open fields, forests with hidden paths, and vast oceans that stretch beyond the horizon. These are not symbols of escape, but of expansion, the soul stretching after years confined within the narrow walls of another's fortress. It is the archetype of the wanderer awakening, calling you into territories where your worth is not measured by service, but by presence. The narcissist's dreams, in contrast, become claustrophobic. They may see houses where the walls close in, stages where the lights abruptly die, voices in the distance that no longer respond. In archetypal language, this is the beginning of the descent into the wasteland, the same wasteland the wounded king must traverse when the land mirrors the barrenness of his own heart. Without the empath's reflection, the narcissist loses not only their preferred image, but their very anchor to the external world. It is not uncommon for them to seek replacements, but no new supply ever replicates the original resonance. There is always a faint discord, a lack of authenticity, because what they truly long for is not a new admirer, but the restoration of the vanished mirror. Here lies a truth that the empath often recognizes only later. When you walk away, you are not only liberating yourself from their grasp, but also liberating them from the illusion that another can do their inner work for them. In the moment, this may not feel like liberation. It may feel like grief, confusion, or unbearable loss. Yet the psyche values truth above comfort. By withdrawing, you have delivered a truth too immense to convey in words alone. You have declared without speech, I will no longer participate in the denial of your shadow. From the mystical perspective, every relationship functions as a crucible. The narcissist-empath bond is among the most intense because it is forged from complementary wounds. The narcissist fears annihilation without control. The empath fears abandonment without giving. Together, these fears form a closed circuit of energy, endlessly reinforcing one another. To break that circuit is to awaken both terrors at once. Yet without that rupture, neither soul can evolve toward individuation. The months after the separation are when the archetypes shift most powerfully. For the empath, the archetype of the caregiver loosens its grasp. In its place, the inner sovereign begins to rise, steady, luminous, and free. Not the false sovereign who rules others, but the inner ruler who governs themselves. You may begin to notice subtle shifts in your boundaries, in the way you express your truth, in the ease with which you now say no without the old residue of guilt. These are not merely surface-level changes or simple psychological improvements. They are the signs of the self reclaiming its throne within, the deeper structure of your psyche reorganizing itself around your own inner center rather than another's gravitational pull. The narcissist, in their own shadowed way, undergoes a parallel initiation. Without a devoted empath to absorb their projections and maintain their illusion, they may start, often unwillingly, to recognize the recurring patterns that define their behavior. This awareness may come as brief flashes, swiftly dismissed, or as a sting in relationships that end in painfully familiar ways. If the narcissist possesses even a fragment of true reflection, these repetitions can become the first small cracks in the fortress of denial. Yet here lies the essential difference. The empath's transformation begins almost immediately after withdrawal. The narcissist's potential awakening, however, may take years, sometimes even decades, before genuine self-confrontation becomes possible. In a few rare and courageous cases, I have witnessed what occurs when the narcissist truly turns inward after the empath's departure. It is not glorious. It is harrowing. The false self does not vanish. It dies slowly, and every fragment of its death feels like an unraveling of identity. They grieve their masks, their roles, and the certainty that others would always orbit around them. If they persist through that fire, if they allow themselves to feel the sorrow rather than deflect it outward, they begin to encounter the inner child, the archetype of the divine child, wounded, buried, but still alive. This meeting can be profoundly transformative, yet terrifying, for it demands that they love what they have long despised in themselves. And you, the empath, may feel their pull even across the distance. Energy is not limited by physical space. The psychic threads woven between you may still hum with tension long after the dance has ended. In dreams, they may appear again at your door, or you may find yourself wandering through old rooms, wondering how you returned. These are not signs that you should reopen the connection. They are invitations from your unconscious, an opportunity to see whether any part of you still inhabits that old role. As long as a fragment of you remains there unclaimed and unhealed, the cord vibrates with memory. To truly sever it, you must reclaim every piece of your soul that once served their story. With time and conscious attention, you will feel the shift. The longing will soften, the memories will lose their sting, and the figure of the narcissist will transform from a living presence into a symbolic teacher within your personal myth. You will see them not merely as the one who drained you, but as the one who, through their hunger, forced you to confront the deeper wound that made you give without end. This realization is not conventional forgiveness, it is integration. To integrate is to retrieve the energy you left in another's keeping and weave it back into the tapestry of your being. The narcissist, if they remain unchanged, will inevitably find another empath and repeat the pattern. But even then, your withdrawal leaves a silent message etched into their psyche, a crack in the mirror that no new reflection can completely erase. Somewhere, perhaps only in the twilight before sleep or in the quietest hours of solitude, they will remember the one who walked away. And with that remembrance comes a seed of a question they may one day dare to ask. Who am I without someone else to see me? For you, the answer will already be blossoming. You will know that you are not defined by the part you played, nor by the reflection you once offered, nor by the wound that bound you to them. You are the dreamer who has awakened from the dream, the wanderer who has stepped beyond the gates of the old kingdom, the soul who has turned toward the inner horizon and begun the long journey home. there comes a time long after the parting when the air around the story changes. It is no longer charged with the static of old battles, nor heavy with the grief of separation. It becomes something quieter, a stillness after the storm, when the earth is soaked and the air smells of renewal. In this silence, the shapes of what truly happened begin to emerge with greater clarity. The break between empath and narcissist is not just a personal event. It is the visible edge of an ancient psychic pattern unraveling within the collective. The empath and the narcissist are not mere opposites. They are bound by their shared distortion of the same archetype, the lover. In the empath, the lover's energy flows entirely outward, pouring life force into another in search of communion. In the narcissist, the same archetype has turned inward, curdled into self-adoration, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by love never fully received. Together, they form a closed circuit. One gives, one takes, both avoiding the deeper, more terrifying task of turning the gaze inward, not in self-obsession, but in self-reunion. When the empath finally withdraws, the circuit breaks. The current stops flowing through its familiar path, and both are left to face the emptiness within the pattern. For the narcissist, this emptiness feels like starvation. For the empath, it feels like silence. Starvation drives the narcissist outward, searching for substitutes. New admirers, distractions, battles for control. Silence drives the empath inward, toward the terrain they abandoned while tending to another's needs. This is why your paths diverge so sharply after the split. One runs from the inner world, while the other, though fearful, begins to step into it. This inner stepping is not a single moment of revelation, but a gradual pilgrimage. The empath learns to recognize their own projections, to endure the discomfort of not being needed, to build an identity not defined by servitude. And in that rebuilding, something extraordinary unfolds. The same sensitivity that once bound you to the narcissist's moods becomes a refined instrument for hearing the voice of your own soul. This is individuation in its purest expression, the slow, sacred shaping of a life that grows from your center outward rather than from another's center inward. The narcissist's road is far more difficult, not because they are incapable of transformation, but because transformation demands the dismantling of the very structure they have sworn to preserve. To face their shadow is to acknowledge that the empire they built was made of mirrors, not stone. Such acknowledgments feel like ego death, and so they avoid them, choosing instead to find another empath who can reflect them back into being. Yet even when they succeed, the seed you left behind remains. It is the knowledge, however faint, that the mirror can walk away. That awareness corrodes the illusion of permanence, and over time, it becomes the first fracture in their fortress. It is tempting to measure healing by whether the other evolves, but in the work of the soul, the true measure is not the transformation of the other, it is the liberation of the self. Your freedom does not depend on their awakening. It depends on your willingness to keep walking, even when the old pull tugs at you like a familiar tide. Freedom is not a single escape. It is the daily act of choosing not to re-enter the dream you have already outgrown. As this choice becomes your rhythm, you begin to see the relationship not as wasted years or as tragedy, but as initiation. You entered that connection as one version of yourself and emerged as another. You were tempered by fire, not a fire of punishment, but of purification. The fire was the friction between two psyches caught in archetypal conflict, the part of you that sought to heal and the part of them that sought to possess. When the flames finally consumed the illusion, what remained was the essence of you, bare, unguarded, luminous in its simplicity, and perhaps in the stillness that follows, you will meet them again, not in person, but in memory, in dream, or in the quiet corridors of the psyche where all figures from our past continue to walk. You may see them differently then, not as the enemy who drained you, nor the tragic soul you failed to save, but as a teacher who spoke in the dialect of your deepest wound. In that moment, the wound ceases to be only a site of pain. It becomes a wellspring of wisdom. You will know that you have reclaimed what was always yours. This is the final transformation, not theirs, but yours. The narcissist without the empath may never change, may continue their endless journey, seeking mirrors that never truly satisfy. But you, having stepped beyond the dance, will carry the imprint of this initiation into every new horizon. You will recognize the early signs of the old pattern before it roots itself again. You will feel the subtle tightening in your body when someone demands your light without offering their own. And you will walk away, quietly, confidently, without the guilt that once bound you to the stage. The answer to the question, who does the narcissist become when the empath stops playing along, is not a single image, but a spectrum. Some become hollow echoes of their former selves. Some withdraw into isolation. A rare few begin the descent toward authenticity. But perhaps the deeper question is this: who do you become when you stop playing along? For the true work of the soul has never been to reshape another's mask. It is to remove your own, to meet yourself standing there in the clear, unreflected light. In that meeting, the dance finally ends, not because the music has ceased, but because you have learned to move to a rhythm that was never theirs to set. And that, above all else, is the freedom no illusion, no narcissist, and no shadow can ever take from you.